All right. I know we have some people here if you want to go ahead and kind of get started.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is our third webinar in the last few months. Today we're going to be talking about the growth equation, which is a methodology that we use with a lot of our clients, but the main focus is how to get your sales team talking with your marketing team, talking with your executive team, get everybody aligned and have like a great system to really help the organization plan and drive growth. So I've got a few guys here with me today. We'll introduce in a second. But the first thing I want to do was ask the audience, how aligned do you feel your company's sales and marketing leadership is right now on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being that they can't even be in the same room together, and 5 is that everything is working great and we feel really good about the process. And that poll should pop up on your screen. And looking, we have 6 people say that they work pretty well together. So nobody's perfect and nobody's bad. Excellent. All right, well, we'll meet the hosts now that we've got a little bit of background there. The 3 of us Fungi's will be your hosts today. I'm Ryan Forrest. I'm the chief Fungi and teller of bad dad jokes here at Fungi Marketing. I have a almost 4-year-old at home. That's why I'm really good at bad dad jokes. I'll kick it over to Ryan Bowles to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Bowles, the other Ryan, the Deuce, whatever you want to call me. But head up sales here at Fungi, so get to bring the perspective of that annoying sales guy that everybody loves to the table. So glad to be here.
And Gary Fly.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Fly. I've known Ryan Forrest and Ryan Bowles and worked with both of them in different capacities over the last decade or so, and have had the privilege to work with many great clients similar to the one Delonica works with at the FMRT Group in a interim and fractional C-suite sort of role. And I'll be bringing that capacity to the webinar today.
He's also a certified barbecue judge.
Indeed. I'm thinking about maybe having some for lunch.
Nice. Excellent. All right. We'll get into it. So let's talk a little bit about the real problem that we find when we first start speaking with clients about these challenges is this misalignment about where their marketing investment is being spent. So our graph on the right-hand side is kind of the above the iceberg and below the iceberg perspective of how much money is being invested in these channels and what the subsequent revenue results are. Maybe up 1 month, maybe down another month, but we're not necessarily sure exactly what to attribute to the marketing. And then below the surface is this kind of like lost opportunities and maybe lost market share because you're not necessarily tuning in and establishing where that money is having the greatest impact. So from the executive level, from Gary's seat, it's more, you can see activity, but we're not exactly sure if there's a clear line, a clear ROI being illustrated. And the problem that really happens when you're not tracking this stuff and you're not meeting somewhat regularly is that too much time lapses before you can determine whether or not it was worth the investment. Gary and Ryan, do you have anything to add to this particular slide?
Yeah, you hit on it, Ryan, in that it's oftentimes, are we getting anything out of this investment, right? When we buy capital equipment, when we buy tools and hard assets for a company, we think about ROI. And I would submit to you that we need to have that same sort of mindset around marketing and just continue to ask questions, continue to have the sales and marketers work together to really force those sort of conversations. But I believe you can get there in any marketing and sales operation. It just takes a little discipline and time.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think just getting people out of working in silos, right? Everyone, in most companies I've been with, everyone does their job, right? It's usually not a question of like, is someone doing the right thing or whatever? It's how effective is that being? And oftentimes, what we'll see is marketing will do a lot, drive a campaign, get a bunch of people to show up to the campaign, but then sales feels like maybe they can't do anything with it, or there weren't the right opportunities. But then the C-suite just sees, well, I spent a lot of money. We saw a lot of leads come in. So where are our deals? If there's not a lot of feedback, a lot of conversations going on, if everybody's just kind of doing in silos what they see, it's really hard to get aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, what misalignment looks like today, some of you may be familiar with this classic quote back and forth from Glenn Ross, but the sales perspective, Ryan's perspective, is the leads are junk. The surprise campaigns, there's no feedback loop. And from the marketer's perspective, my point of view is that we hit our numbers. We generated, 100 leads last month, but sales can't close. So sales saying the leads are weak, and we're saying you're weak. So, along those lines, we have our second poll. Do your sales and marketing teams share at least one primary KPI and one maybe well-defined KPI? So how they define, for instance, what a lead is. You can see here our little bit of a difference of opinion about maybe what a lead is on our end.
So what we find oftentimes is, again, back to the silo idea, marketing has their own KPIs, their own metrics, everything that they're tracking that is usually determined by a marketing person, right? And then sales in the same way, a sales leader will determine what quotas are, what expected close ratios, those sorts of things. And then finance or C-suite will have, the numbers going on overall. But unless there's some shared things, right? Again, marketing may say, hey, we're generating 80% more visits to the website. We've gotten 35 more calls. But if sales is saying that not a single one of them is a qualified potential person, or is that really a lead, right? So this idea of not only communicating and not working out of a silo, but actually having a defined metric that the entire company understands, that each department is saying, yes, I'm tracking with it. Here's here's how I contributed to it. And here's my number. And that it gets rid of that, finger pointing. So what we see oftentimes is there's not even a single shared KPI between everybody has their own. So the question here is, do you have kind of this cross divisional shared KPI or not?
Yeah. It looks like. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, and what I hope the folks watching and listening take away from this is, as basic as this sounds, it's really a foundational bedrock for successful collaboration between sales and marketing, right? And truly, as foundational is defining a lead, right? So that they both have the same sort of operational definition of what a lead is and how that lead gets treated. But I would encourage anyone that's watching to really go back and audit the very foundational sort of things that they talk about, measure, and collaborate on.
Yeah, and every organization is different too. So I think that
Right.
That definition can definitely vary quite a bit based on who your ideal client profile is and who you're trying to reach. Whether you're more of a business to business or a
Yes.
retail. There's a lot of variation there.
Right. And your point about different clients or different companies having different definitions is exactly right, which is why it's so important to define it, because if people have come from different previous employers, they may have a completely different working definition.
Yeah. Or no definition at all.
Or no difference.
It's more common than you'd think.
Yeah, indeed.
So here it is, the growth equation. There are sort of three pillars associated with the growth equation. The first one is having some shared key performance indicators. So shared definitions and shared metrics associated with what defines a lead, what defines a customer, and having a sort of central tracking tool like a scorecard, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, that your sales team, your marketing team, and your leadership can all review on a regular basis. The second thing, equally as important, is shared systems, and this could be something like a CRM, like Salesforce or HubSpot, where you're tracking all of the people who interact with your organization, from leads to customers to vendors, and ideally have that single central component to your business, so that you can review that internally and see, are our communications consistent? Are we saying the same thing? And also, having some back and forth between your sales and marketing and executive leadership to make sure that, for instance, if Ryan is having conversations with prospects and they're talking about, specific key challenges that relate to your offerings, it'd be great for your marketing team to be able to incorporate some of those challenges and some solution-oriented verbiage in their collateral, in their campaigns, to help that feedback loop can help us to draw in a more qualified audience. And that leads into the shared story, where your website, all of your campaigns, and all of your conversations that you're having with potential customers and existing customers and the community at large has a consistent tempo, has a good, consistent feedback loop. Ryan, Gary, anything you guys would like to add to that?
I just think the point you made, the sales team is out there. They're the tip of the spear, often talking to clients. They're in the industry. They're understanding likely what competitors are doing. It's just such a rich source of real-time intel that the marketers really benefit from understanding and knowing. So that collaboration, that those folks having those conversations internally ought to really materially improve the results for both sides of that, both the salespeople and the marketers.
Yeah, I really like that shared story, right? There's nothing worse than getting on a discovery call for the first time, knowing, and this has happened to me countless times, right? Knowing whatever service product we're selling, have a sales pitch ready to go, but they saw some campaign that marketing put out that I didn't even know we were running. Right. And so they're showing up to a conversation that I didn't even know we were supposed to have. That may sound crazy, but it's literally happened to me multiple times, where I didn't know what our marketing department, not here at Fungi, but in previous lives, was doing. Right. And people show, oh, tell me about this special promotion you're running. And I'm like, I don't have the first clue about it. Right. And so that if that's not a wasted opportunity, I don't know what is. Right. We got a willing person to get on the call, set time apart, and then I didn't even know what they wanted to talk about. So having that shared story that is based on a shared system, that is foundation on the shared KPIs, it really just makes everything move a lot smoother.
Yep, 100%. So just taking a little bit of a deeper dive on these pillars, we actually did a presentation a couple of months ago about developing an ROI calculator and a system for tracking return on investment from your marketing spend. So we won't dwell too much on this, but just to know that, and also we'll send a link to that calculator along with the confirmation from this, the recording of this presentation as well. But having systems in place to track things like just everybody who's come into contact with you, and follow them kind of through their customer journey from becoming just a high level lead all the way through to being a customer. And then the executive team is going to be tracking things like, what is the average annual value of a customer, what's our profit margin. And subsequently, on the right-hand side, you kind of have these outputs that give you a little bit of a better idea as to maybe how much you should be spending on acquiring new leads in order to continue to still turn a profit for the organization. There might be people asking questions about this, and I love that. I did want to remind you, if you do have questions, there's actually a questions tab in your interface, and feel free to drop those in there. And then you can also drop those in the chat, and we'll definitely circle back on those when we get to the end of the presentation for the Q&A session.
So yeah, so I think this is really good, helpful. It may look like a lot of numbers that are like, where do I even start? Again, I think if you look back at that ROI webinar we did earlier, then it also becomes pretty clear that some of this is pretty straightforward, right? It's, you know, an MQL, a marketing qualified lead. What does marketing determine is kind of their metric. The sales qualified lead is one step farther down the pipeline, right? An example could be, you know, they're a confirmed person ready to buy in the next 6 months or whatever the case may be. And then they move through the pipeline. So as we can, and then other numbers you see on the side here, right? The sales close rate. And that simply is just taking, okay, what has your sales team done in the last year, right? How many conversations have they had? How many opportunities were entered into the pipeline? How many did they close? And you just put that number in. As that number changes, as you get more information, you can adjust it. But this also helps determine, like, hey, we know our close rate is 52% on an annual basis. If for some reason that number drops, then we can start. It's a starting point to start to evaluate what's the cause of that. What's the issue, as opposed to waiting at the end of the year and saying, oh, we missed our revenue target, right? So the idea is we're building KPIs that we can track along the way. So that give us direction of whether we're moving in the right space or we need to pivot before it's too late and you know, our pipeline is depleted.
Yeah, and if I can jump in real quick, I also would suggest, you know, we talked about ROI a minute ago when I mentioned equipment and capital expenses. This starts to frame up how you can think about ROI around marketing spend, right? This becomes very clear. We spent this much money, we attracted this many leads, they were qualified leads, we won this much, this much business or this many new clients out of it. I also believe that it's critical as these KPIs are being formed or created to have senior leadership in there, right? Have the finance person in there, have the CEO in there, because then you start to understand what's important to them. And it really does create alignment among sort of the multiple legs of the stool. And so often I feel like the senior leadership doesn't fully understand some of these types of things and probably hasn't weighed in on them. And therefore they don't really understand if they're getting bang for their buck, right? And so it really does become important for all the key stakeholders inside of an organization to understand the basic definitions, to agree on the KPIs, that sort of thing.
Yep. So on our pillar 2 is shared systems, and this is where, you know, we have a system or multiple systems for tracking performance that our teams are able to access and view and understand. Having a CRM, I think, is probably the most important shared system, whether it's, you know, a shareable spreadsheet or something more sophisticated like HubSpot or SAP or Salesforce, where you can actually see the activities that have been associated with each of these people. You know, see, have we written proposals? Have those proposals been accepted? And here's just a sampling in here of, you know, kind of the process of where each person's at in the pipeline. And being able to understand that too helps give, you know, marketers a perspective on, oh, okay, so we know, you know, these companies came in through these channels, maybe social media or organic Google searching, or maybe they were referred or they attended a trade show. And then we can see, like, what is the quality of the leads coming from those channels? How are they turning into opportunities? And then, of course, in the sales pipeline, sales can understand, you know, the same kind of the reverse side of it is, okay, well, I know that these people coming from these channels tend to perform better. And you develops conversation that can help with that shared story and development of new campaigns and things along those lines.
Yeah, and I think the important part here is having a shared system, right? If maybe you're not ready for a full-on HubSpot or Salesforce, you know, spreadsheets can go a long way, especially if you're not tracking at all. You know, there are a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit to get started. If you are using a HubSpot or a Salesforce, which a lot of companies are, we also find a lot of people, like a sales team is using their own CRM, and then a marketing team may be using another one entirely, and there is no connection between the two. I think the idea is whatever you're using today, find a way to get it shared, right? Whether that's the same system, whether that's connecting them, whether that's joining them through a spreadsheet, but just having one central database where marketing, sales, and leadership can all look and get all of the information that's needed in one central place.
Right. And what, right. There's a theme coming out, right? Shared systems, collaboration on the KPIs, shared definitions and whatnot. And as a leader in an organization, what I want to do is create collaboration as opposed to finger pointing, right?
Mhm.
And so if we can bring this down to the foundations and agree on what we're measuring, why we're measuring, what's important, we all have visibility into it, then it becomes a collaborative environment, right? We're not accusing people. I now trust Ryan on the marketing side. I now trust Ryan on this Bowles on the sales side to go and do and engage in ways that make sense to me as a leader in the organization. And so really, I think that's a thread that we can't emphasize.
Exactly. Yeah. Share as much as you can. I feel comfortable sharing.
That's right. Share and collaborate.
Yeah. So all of that sort of culminates, this sharing, into a shared story where we have we know who our ideal customers are. We know what our go-to-market strategy is. We know the challenges and problems that we solve for them. And we can develop a approach for communicating to those people that both sales and marketing and leadership can all be on the same page. So obviously things like your website, your marketing campaigns, and your sales conversations, your collateral, how you choose which trade shows to go to or other events to participate in, all of that can kind of like come together and tell a consistent message that of course gets refined over time. And so that's, from a marketing perspective, invaluable, having a really great story to share. And to Ryan's point earlier, not have surprise stories that he's maybe not aware of, like promotions or whatever it may be, can kind of put a damper on what maybe marketing is working hard to produce for them. So any other thoughts on this one, guys?
No, I mean, I think we
I would just, yeah, I would. I do actually have one short one, and I would argue again that when this process is in place and working well, the marketers are able to nuance and refine the language they use, the images they use, the campaigns that they use, the tools they use to match what's going on in the marketplace in real time. And so there's sort of a first mover advantage, if you will, available when those conversations are rich and when the information is being shared freely, openly, and it's quality information being shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to talk in a minute a little bit about a better framework for regular meetings, but let's go through this poll. How frequently does your leadership team meet to align on your growth initiatives, your growth KPIs currently? And this is the one that I'm most excited to see the poll results from. So we got 6 of 8. So looks like mostly monthly, some weekly, and 1 annually, which is not frequently enough, I would say, if you're just meeting once a year to talk about growth. Cool. Thank you, everybody, for participating there. Okay, so I'm gonna let Gary kind of run this, but this is the sort of like one of the main components associated with the growth equation, which is the scorecard. And so whether obviously you want to have really well defined or good definitions for each of these components, for each of these departments, each of the things that you're tracking, and everybody's in agreement on those. But in addition to that, just having a good regular cadence. And in our case, we recommend doing it on a weekly basis. daily I think would be overkill, but having kind of like weekly reviews and then kind of monthly look backs and maybe some analysis. So Gary, you want to go ahead and
Yeah, and I want to also set this up, right? Because the last slide you ended by saying we encourage people to meet regularly. In the poll you asked how often that is, and so I think a natural question is, well, why are we meeting and what are we doing, right? And what we're doing in this meeting is we're fostering sort of a collaborative work environment, and we're creating conversations based on measurable outcomes that have been defined by everybody in the room as desirable, attainable, and necessary for the business to function in a healthy way, right? And so what we're really doing here is saying, hey, let's come together as a team regularly, identify where we are without emotion. It just is what it is. And I caution people to say it's good and bad. It just is. It's information. And then as each group goes through their numbers in their section, you can determine what you actually want to talk about. Like as a group, in the way this is laid out, right? We're going to go through marketing, sales, and financial, but a good disciplined team will allow Ryan Forrest to go through the marketing fully, allow Ryan Bowles to go through sales fully, allow me to go through the financial stuff fully. And then from that, say, hey, we need to go back to this thing that Ryan Forrest talked about on the marketing side and really discuss it, because we're now seeing a trend over the last 4 weeks of declining, BDR outreach or whatever it is. So with that, I sort of set the stage a little bit. Typically, what we would do is we would ask each owner of each section to report in on how they're doing and give us a little commentary about the results. So as we start this one, we're going to start with the marketing section. So Ryan Forrest.
Yeah, so we'll kind of, I know we're going to short on time here too, so I'm just going to kind of scream through my stuff. But on the BDR side, which is kind of our cold sales outreach, we reached out to 102 new contacts last week, and that was across 188 touches, meaning about 2 touches per contact. We had, as far as our outbound leads, we didn't have any from this activity that we tracked in the CRM, but our inbound activities, we had 9 total new leads between our calls and contact forms. And then from that, we had 3 marketing qualified leads and 2 sales qualified opportunities that came out. One of those met our ICP criteria, meaning that they scored greater than 80 on our ratings for who our ideal client profile is. And our cost to get those leads last week was about $576.
Great. Anything that we need to discuss as a group based on that, or before we move to Ryan Forrest or Ryan Bowles, rather?
I would say, on the marketing side for BDR, we just have not been getting any leads from those activities, and we've been at it for 3 weeks now. And so we might need to look at kind of the language that we're using in those outreach emails and the target segments, see if there's something. But the other stats I would say look pretty typical, like we're either meeting or exceeding our targets in a lot of cases. And so I feel confident in those, but
very good. I captured the BDR effectiveness. Excellent. Ryan Bowles.
Yeah, so on the sales side, obviously working through the leads that are coming through. This week we scheduled 5 meetings. Some of those were from previous weeks that have come through. It took a little while to get going, but so 5 on the books. Held 2 of those this week. I would say it was probably a 50-50 split. One was a great contact, right buyer, right persona, seemed really interested in what we were doing. The other one was more of a lower level kind of employee. I think maybe they got caught up in a campaign or something. It was a decent conversation, but that's not our buyer, right? So I'm working on trying to connect past them and try to find out who their boss is to try to continue the conversation. Sent 3 proposals. Again, those were all from previous weeks. Totaling this is a lower week. They were smaller proposals, 90,000 total for us, but still got 3 out the door. And then one from actually back in January, fairly large deal, 125,000. And yeah, so that looking ready to get that kicked off. Looks like that came from a campaign we started in January. So that was all positive there.
Very good. Anything that we would need to discuss as a group later on?
No, I think just making sure that, again, we're targeting the right audience as best we can. I'm loving that we're getting our client level ICP is great. I think we can try to drill in on the actual contact and making sure we're talking to the right person within the company.
Very good. All right. And then financial side, we have to have cash to pay for all this. And we want to understand the benefit of what we're doing, and is the company doing okay? And so we want our receivables to be higher than our payables, generally speaking, I would say. So our receivables are good at 52,000, so higher than our target. Our payables are lower than what we typically see, so that's also a good move. Means we're collecting cash. We're right at our average, or I'm sorry, we're a little above our average at $198,000. We anticipate we actually had 174 come in at the end of last week, and then our net income is 43,000 versus a target of 50. So generally speaking, cash is looking and finances are looking okay. There's really nothing to worry about, I don't believe, and the trends have been fine. So that's very consolidated how we would do something like that. And I hope it just gives a little flavor of why and what you might discuss.
Yep. And maybe Gary, you could also, I feel like that was a component of this sort of standing weekly meeting, but if you could kind of run us just kind of through the highlights of that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring all the people together that can add value and that will receive value from this meeting. So in our case, it's marketing, sales, finance, or a senior leader of the organization, like the CEO or whatnot. And then we want to structure an agenda that helps us create a really meaningful conversation during the meeting. We start with successes from the past week. It's often hard to remember what those are, and people want to come into a meeting hot with something that's urgent. So we cause a little slowdown and say, let's talk about what successes were for the week. And then out of that, are there any items for discussion? Does somebody have a topic that they know we need to discuss? We'll look at the previous week's to-dos as a way to make sure we're holding each other accountable and we're having to report back to the group on what actually occurred. We then review the scorecard. Again, the idea is that it's going to bubble up topics that we might want to talk about. We're going to identify anything that's working and not working. And then we'll have a deeper discussion around that, what's not working, and assign to-dos and whatnot for the coming week.
Yeah. And so I would say this meeting can be anywhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours, but ideally
Yes.
somewhere on the shorter end of that. And especially if, this is, I think, maybe more inclusive of even like a broader meeting where you could have operations or other folks involved. But from the sales and marketing, aligning with leadership perspective, definitely hitting on, a couple good insights and a couple, if needed, assignments for the coming week to work on.
Right.
Then, we use this internally for ourselves, and we've got clients that use this. It's a great system. All right. So we are past time. Recapping real quick, the growth equation involves those 3 pillars: having shared KPIs, having shared systems like a CRM, and then having a shared story that you broadcast to the greater world. And then having a good scorecard in place to track those KPIs and have some discussions around what's going on. And then finally, having a meeting, ideally on a weekly basis, with your sales team, marketing team, and leadership team to talk about how things have been going. And I would suggest to you having maybe monthly and or quarterly reviews as well, that maybe just are whatever that standing meeting turns into, just to kind of like look back and see how things are progressing. So our suggestion for those of you who want to do this on your own is to take the first 30 days and define what are your shared KPIs, build a simple weekly scorecard, and run a couple of meetings and see how things go. See how looking at that information on a weekly basis and aligning with your internal team, is it helping? Is it hurting? How is it changing things? And then over the course of the next 30 days, using those trends to start to feed new insights in and start to tweak your marketing side, maybe tweak a little bit on the sales side. And then finally, after that 90-day period, really just formalize a cadence that works best for you, maybe like weekly or monthly, and make sure that it's built into your leadership meetings. So just I want to have one more Glenn Ross reference here, because this is the one that gets the most play usually on closing new deals. But if you wanted to maximize your ROI with Fungi, we have a pretty simple plan that we can implement for you. We help a lot of clients who are struggling with sales and marketing alignment, resulting in either slowing revenue or fluctuations that can't really be determined. We're not sure where the marketing spend should go, or like how it is performing. And so we have we call it a blueprint, a strategy blueprint that helps to kind of do those first couple of pillars. We can help you to define what metrics are most important to you and each of your teams, and to build out that preliminary scorecard that you can use in those meetings, and even maybe give you a couple weeks of that. So that first maybe 30 to 60 days that in the previous slide. And if you're interested in having us help out, you can book a complimentary discovery call to see if the blueprint's right for you. Just reply to any of the emails that you've received from us for this campaign, or you can always go to our website, fill out a contact form, or give us a call. All right. Any parting thoughts, Gary and Ryan, before we jump into Q&A? We got like 2 minutes.
I mean, the leads are weak.
The leads are weak. Coffee is for closers.
There you go. I think the emphasis on bringing people together, having shared definitions, shared scorecards, shared information is a huge step for any organization that feels that they're struggling to understand what's going on with their sales cycle, what's going on with their marketing spend, et cetera.
Yeah. And I think really this is, sales and marketing have a very natural tendency to finger point, right? But they're so reliant and dependent on each other. I think this conversation gets out of the finger pointing and just gets into the reality, right? We're not pointing fingers. We're not blaming anybody. If the leads are weak, let's have a conversation about it, right? If sales isn't closing, let's have a conversation about it, as opposed to just throwing it over the fence and blaming somebody else.
Excellent. All right, we do have some questions, so I'll read them off, and I can answer some, and I'll maybe kick some to others. So the first one is, what's the difference between an MQL and an SQL? I think that question came in earlier, and I think Ryan actually did a pretty good job defining it, but just looking at marketing qualified lead, and these definitions can vary wildly per organization, but from our perspective, a marketing qualified lead would be somebody that is a legitimate person that has a legitimate interest in the business, but we have not maybe qualified them from a perspective of, can they afford our product or service, and are they willing to act? I think Ryan had said willing to act sometime in the next 30 to 60 days on that. So that's how we would sort of differentiate between marketing qualified and sales qualified. The next question is, for the shared KPIs, how does the growth team decide which KPIs they should be sharing? Gary, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So I think it really is a discussion. I would submit that most leaders have an idea. So a sales leader has an idea of what's important to them, probably a bonus plan around that. A marketing leader has an idea of what's important to them. And then the senior, the CEO, the business owner, the CFO has an idea of what's important to them. So as basic as it sounds, sometimes just having each of them bring those things to a discussion, putting it all out on the table, I have found is a good first step, right? Because it creates awareness among the different parts of the organization of what the other thinks is important. And then the challenge becomes sort of whittling those down. Like what are the one or two or three things that you really need to be focused on?
Yeah, because it's important to know that every department has their own KPIs that are going to be important to them that aren't necessarily a shared KPI, right? I know one of them, website views is one big thing that comes up all the time. That is very important to somebody in the organization, and it's an important metric to track. It may not be the best one on a shared KPI and a shared scorecard, because to Gary's point, we got to whittle it down to what are the core ones. So we're not diminishing anybody's KPIs. It's just really landing on what are the important ones to share and discuss every week.
Yeah, I do think, like from the marketing side, there is some for things like click-through rates and conversion rates and things along those lines that maybe sales doesn't necessarily need to see or care about. If it's just like, yeah, well, you're tracking how many people came to our website, but I'm only concerned with how many are on my calendar this week, kind of a thing. And so being able to differentiate between, well, we need to understand if our ads are resonating in a marketplace, and click-through rates and clicks and activity on our website and like where people are coming from to convert are all important, but maybe not important for that leadership call. It's just there's some things can still stay in their little silos. We don't have to share everything.
That's right.
Right.
Especially you, Gary. Just kidding. All right, we got a couple more questions, and apologize we're a little bit late on time, but we'll go through these last couple and then let everybody go. Oh, there's another one just got added. If sales and marketing can't agree on what to do, how do we break the tie? I think last time we did a battle royale, Ryan, you and me, jumped in the ring and fought one another. Is that how we did it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think
great question. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think having sort of a senior person in the room, maybe a neutral, again, the CFO, CEO will help that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, it may be as basic as going back to the strategic plan. Like, what is the company trying to do, and which of those things aligns more closely with the ultimate company desired outcomes, right? At the end of the day, we're most sales and marketing operations are competing for scarce resources in terms of investment dollars.
Yeah.
And so, what's best for the organization to move it forward and reach its goals at some point has to be a part of the discussion. But I really do believe having that senior person in there that maybe has a little bit of a different perspective, in that it's a holistic perspective. It's not just their vertical. It's not just the sales vertical, not just the marketing vertical, but it's the organization as a whole is a way to go about that.
Yep. And then how do you figure out if it's really a lead quality problem versus a sales conversion problem? So this is our finger pointing, right? The leads are weak versus you can't close on the sales side of things. And I think that's the CRM is one core component of that, because you can see what so long as your teams are properly tracking and everything's kind of in there, you can kind of see what is a typical life cycle. Because I know that sales conversion can definitely vary per sales rep. In our history, I've seen that take place. It's never the marketing's fault, but often it is based on the sales rep. Anything to say about that, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think it's gathering data, right? And the more data we have, the less finger pointing that happens. And so we can take a look and say, hey, historically, our close rate is at 25%. Whether anyone thinks that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's what it is, right? And so if we start to dip below that, then we can start looking, again, we take the different KPIs, we use those to drill down based on whatever we see starting to miss the target, right? So if this marketing leads are still up and the conversion rate all of a sudden goes down, right? I think that's a place we start looking, right? Okay, did the sales team change anything? Are they doing anything different? Is the behavior different? If the answer is no, then you move on to the next thing. You continue moving up the funnel while using these different KPIs to kind of tell us where to start drilling down and where to start paying attention. So we're not just having to look at this massive problem and say, we need more.
Well, I think that there's maybe like a third potential element here, right? Like it may not actually be either of those, where
That's
it's
right.
quality or sales conversion. It may just be product market fit. Maybe you have a competitor that, they came like that is taking away your customers or other kind of unknowns. And so I think, like to Ryan's point, like having good data in place and regularly checking in on it. And obviously, sales can ask more questions of the customer to determine, like, oh, how did you really hear about us? Oh, I saw you on the back of some magazine in my neighborhood. Like maybe it's where we're marketing that could be the problem. So there could be all sorts of things associated with that.
Yeah. Can I jump in real quick? I know we're pressed. However, I would submit to you that this is where clarity around definitions is critical and good measuring is critical. For example, we talked about a marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead, right? If we've got shared agreement on what those are and we're measuring it every week, we can start to say, hey, you know what? We're seeing a dip in the marketing qualified leads, which is really the tip of the spear for the sales team, right? And so it's like, okay, there's a challenge on the marketing side. Conversely, if the marketing team is generating above and beyond what they expected on the marketing qualified leads, but the sales team is having a hard time closing it, then maybe that points to an issue on the sales side. Again, the idea is let's force clarity around definitions and then let's measure back to those things so that we take the emotion out of it and we can have collaborative, constructive discussions.
Yep. Absolutely.
You never want sales and marketing guys getting emotional.
Well, sales guys, especially talking to people. Marketing will just go sulk in the corner for a while. All right, let's pick one more. All right, so I got 3 questions. I'm going to let Ryan pick which one we want to do. So how long is the weekly growth meeting typically? Oh, you know what? We kind of already answered that. It's somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour and a half. What kind of marketing ROI does Fungi typically provide for your clients? How long does the marketing strategy blueprint you offer take? You want to pick from one of those two? So how long is the blueprint, or what kind of ROI do we typically provide?
Yeah, so I mean, we can answer both those real quick. The blueprint, usually anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks, depending on how complex you're looking to get involved, kind of how mature you are right now. But usually, within a month, we're able to launch and provide some very specific scorecards, KPIs, and different metrics there. As far as the kind of marketing ROI that we provide our clients, it's really all about understanding what your actual marketing investment dollars are, right? Not necessarily saying, hey, spend more. It's what do you have access to? And really understanding what are the constraints, right? Most of our clients are mid-sized to small businesses, right, that don't have millions and millions of dollars to throw at marketing. And so really having to be very strategic on, every dollar worth it. This idea that half of marketing dollars wasted, like we buck against that wholeheartedly, where, if you're investing in marketing, we want to see an ROI. And making sure that we're creating different campaigns, running different scorecards, having the things that the investment that you're putting in, which also includes time, not just dollars, right? But is that time that you're putting in, does it produce the results that you're looking for? Oftentimes that's direct leads and conversions and, increased revenue, which is great. Sometimes it's more of an awareness campaign and trying to associate some level of ROI on this awareness campaign. We know that it's not going to produce 10 more leads, but is it going to set us up as a business expert in this space, right? and trying to develop strategies around what is this kind of second tier, third tier marketing awareness campaign. How does that drive to your bottom of your ROI? Those are the kind of things that we're looking at, right? Obviously, when you spend money on Google or Facebook or any of those other things, that's very clear to track. However, we want to make sure that every investment, whether that's dollars spent or time, has an appropriate KPI and is being tracked accordingly.
And that's where, obviously with our marketing services, we typically will not do those until we've gone through a comprehensive blueprint stage. And the blueprint phase is just to take all the judgment out, all the finger pointing, this is just the reality of the situation. You get so many leads from these sources, those leads, so many of those are qualified, so many of those become customers, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can kind of just stand back and say, well, okay, you want to invest money in advertising on Google, but you're getting 10 new customers a month by doing these trade shows. Maybe you should invest more in the trade shows. And then, Fungi might help you a little bit with that, pre and post communications or whatever it may be. So it's hard to give a specific ROI. Let's just say, I would say 99% of the people have the level of insight where they can make that decision. We do certainly have some clients that have 5 to 10 times return on investment, but that's not the kind of thing that typically happens overnight or even within the first 2 to 3 months of working with us. So I think we've covered off on most of the questions. We've gone over about 12 minutes. So if anybody else has questions, you can always reach out to us, respond to the emails that we've sent out. And we would love to continue the conversation with you soon. Thanks for joining. Thanks to Gary and Ryan for joining as well and participating today.
Yeah,
Great to be with you.
All right, take care.